Woo! Hey, Zach.
Hey guys, I'm gonna just boost up the volume a little bit here. There we go. How's it going?
That is a great shot.
You guys can all hear me all right? We just switched out the mic.
We can hear. I can hear you fine.
Perfect. All right. Let me see if I can get this presentation out.
I love the settings, Zach.
Yeah, it beats my bedroom. Trust me, I'm happy to not be on Zoom conferences 2 feet from my bed anymore. It's a blessing. Let's go to and
Are we still pushing the SMIC Plus?
I mean, yeah,
Why
we'll
not,
push
right?
it.
Yeah.
That's why I kept it. I mean, they just won't get a shirt.
XMS? No. We'll just say it. Thank you.
Yeah, I
Support.
mean, we'll still offer like mixers. All that. Fine.
All right, we got like 10 people in the waiting room. So I'm gonna start presenting. And can you guys see that? Can you guys see the screen?
yeah. Yeah. I have to ask, is Acuity backwards or is that actually going through the way it's supposed to?
Looks good. Looks
All right.
good. Yeah. Yeah, I always have that same concern.
Yeah, I think we had with our first or second client meeting without realizing it until someone told us. So that was a beautiful thing that happened.
It's just those little things you got to be aware of now. Actually, at the CFAOC competition, some people had their school Zoom background, which
Yeah, wasn't
was
that
pretty cool.
Chapman?
Yeah, you were there.
No, that was the glorious other way.
Welcome everybody. We'll probably get started in just a minute or two, but thank you to everyone who joined us. Hope you guys all had a great spring break, that you got to rest, relax, hopefully have some fun as well. So give me a second here while I just start admitting the rest of the people. Hey, Victor. Hey, Joe. Hi, Professor Mudaseb. Hi, everybody. All right, so welcome to week 10. Today we have a very special guest, one that is an alumni of the school, of our program, IRC, Smith, SMIC as well. So we'll get started with a little bit of announcements, and then we'll get right into it. Cool. So we're still SMIC Plus memberships are still available if you'd like to support the club. We really appreciate all those that sent your dues in and paid your memberships, and that really helps us. We have that budget for next year to hopefully bring more either perks for you guys or get some more merchandise. But thank you to everyone that's paid your dues. Thank you to all of our paying members. We're excited to see what we can give you guys in terms of perks. So yeah. Cool. So please follow our socials. If you want to connect with us, connect with some of our resources and even our guests. The best way to do that is to follow our socials. We have our Instagram. If you want to watch past recordings, if you're a SMIC Plus member, you can access our YouTube through there. I am recording today, so that'll be posted up in the next few days. All right, and just a little foreshadowing of what's coming in the coming weeks. So next week, that derivatives workshop is, I think it's still scheduled. And then we have Matt Gill from Owl Rock, April 20th. And then we have another workshop, and Dr. Roman, professor, is going to give us a short presentation on his economic data. And that's actually a collaborative event with Finance Society. So we're very excited for that. And then that's almost the end of the semester. So be on the lookout for those. We really hope you guys attend those. And now to our main event, Mr. Zachary Winkle, who is an analyst at Acuity Advisors, formerly SEG, I believe. So going through a little rebranding there. We're really fortunate to have him. Like I said, he was an alumni of the Student Managed Investment Fund, also an alumni of the IRC competition. His advisor and the program's mentor, Professor Mudasev, is here as well. So welcome. Acuity Advisors, they're based in Irvine. So they're primarily dealing with fair value and ESOP valuations. Of course, Zach will talk a little bit more about that. So he's pursued a career in finance, and he's going to talk to us about his journey through higher education and how he landed his first job, all the things that went through it. I'm sure everyone here who's in either CFA program or feels like they want to go into an analyst role or even IB, there's a lot to learn. So we're really grateful to have you here, Zach. You're going to share your screen? Let me see if I can give you control.
Let's go and try it. Not able to at the moment, but let me know as soon as you issue the proper permissions, and I'll do so.
Perfect. Let me see. Let me find you here. Okay.
All right. And let's go this one.
And then just for our reference, did you want Q&A at the end? Do you think that'll work better?
Yeah, I think we'll have sufficient time for that. I would be hard pressed if this actually went longer than 40 minutes. We'll see how it goes kind of throughout. I haven't run through it before, so you can just give it a go whenever you guys are ready.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So last announcements. If you guys would like to sign in, the sign-in sheet is in the chat. Also, if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat, and we'll ask them for you towards the end. All right, take it away, Zach.
Excellent, awesome. Well, thank you, Brian. Those of you guys who don't know, I graduated December, so about 4 months ago, which means I would consider myself more of an expert in Cal Poly than I would the actual investment banking evaluation field. And in fact, I believe in 3 or so weeks, you're going to have Michael Levitt, one of the vice presidents of my firm, actually presenting to Finance Society. So when I was kind of asked to come speak, I was going back and forth on what would actually be the most useful, and kind of what I landed on was what do I wish I knew, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, back when I was first transferring into finance. So this presentation is mostly geared towards the sophomore, juniors, or anyone who's kind of in those early stages of switching into finance. So I apologize to all of the seniors, although I'm sure there's still 1 or 2 things in there that you'll hopefully find useful. But it started as what did I wish I knew, and then also kind of morphed into what to expect when you're expecting to enter finance, and then before finally landing on this idea of I really wish I had like a 20-page handbook of what could I possibly go through at Cal Poly that would help me, and what can I expect, and what can I utilize going into the finance industry. So this is kind of what I ended up modeling the presentation after, and heads up, it's a little crude, put it together about an hour or 2 over the weekend, but looking forward to kind of going through it with you guys. And throughout this deck, you'll find a couple of relevant application materials. I put the resume that I applied with, I put in one of my cover letters, just so you guys can maybe see those and model yours after those if you're still kind of in the early stages of drafting what your application material should look like. Along with a lot of what I found to be most useful during my undergraduate path, especially someone who's changed from MHR with no finance experience, none whatsoever, into eventually FRL and going into valuation and IB. Along with a general breakdown on the different types of investment banking and valuation. Really the finance field as a whole is fairly broad and diverse. So I added some stuff on that and some of the pay, so you guys can kind of walk in your interviews with maybe some idea of what you're going to talk about, and also trying to define what path do you want to take, and hopefully you can kind of backtrack that into what you can do now to set yourself up for that in the future. A little bit of networking advice, a little bit of interview guides and tips, and then at the very end I have maybe 5 or 6 links that I just really found useful during my time either preparing to exit Cal Poly or transitioning to the professional world from the academic world. And one of the things I really want to highlight is right down here, everything you see is pretty much based off of my own experience with a couple of resources and links. So by no means is this proper citing material, but it's something that I've kind of built up across the last 2 years or so through personal experience and through talking with a lot of industry experts. I think one of the summers I spent talking to 3 people a week. So this is all kind of a culmination of everything I kind of collected. So first, a little bit about me. Just as Brian said, came into Cal Poly with no finance experience whatsoever. In fact, my only jobs were working at Raging Waters, my dad's old restaurant, and a country club. None of those had anything to do with finance. But eventually, over time, I kind of really tried to step up and take some leadership position that would later pay off quite a bit. That's something that maybe we'll get to in a bit. But again, I came under MHR just because, hey, management sounds cool. I know I want to go into business, don't know what, and that seemed like a pretty broad spectrum. So when I came to Cal Poly, I, again, not exactly lost, but didn't know where I wanted to direct my efforts. So I decided to go broad instead of narrow, in hopes of, hey, I won't totally miss the target and misplace my efforts. And that really kind of drove into my sophomore year, where again, I knew I wanted to get an internship, didn't know what or where, ended up finding a management internship that would later come back and be fairly helpful, just in the fact of, hey, I did something, even if it wasn't in finance, and that really looked favorable, especially when I get to the next slide. One of the things that, again, I'll really stress later is being a balanced applicant. They really are, or at least the whole industry is looking for people who aren't just finance focused. They want someone who is well-rounded, can talk to their clients, and not just be this one-trick pony almost. So one of the things I would highly, highly suggest is really going out and expanding your boundaries. Primarily, what I would highly recommend, and I'll get to this later in more depth, is joining a fraternity or a sorority. By all means, one of the highlights of my undergraduate career, especially with how it would later set me up for the finance field, even without being a finance or business specific fraternity. Later on, I did a couple other things, went to FRL 3000, did fairly well, became a finance tutor, and kind of started to pique my interest in finance, which would lead us to my junior year. At this point, I kind of really started to hone in on, yes, I want to do finance, yes, I want to switch out. Over the summer, I actually joined my fraternity's national headquarters audit review committee, where we would actually review the audit for the entire national fraternity. When I became a Rec Scholar, they flew us out to Virginia, had some cool experiences there. You all know about SMIC, and Smith was part of that. Eventually, that's what was the final tipping point of what got me to switch into finance. Thanks to Professor Mudasev, or Dr. Mudasev, who I believe is in this call, was able to compete in IRC, which was absolutely amazing. And what I did there is what I do every single day now. And then all that kind of culminated into a FRL student of the year. My senior year was pretty short, primarily because I only had 1 semester there. Became a chaplain for my fraternity, graduated, and eventually went on to join Acuity Advisors. Now, one of the things I do want to highlight is on the previous slide and the following slide, I did attach, or at least post, a copy of my resume and my cover letter. Again, these are just materials that hopefully those of you who haven't modeled a resume or cover letter yet can maybe look at and use as an example. And at the very end, this deck will be available to anyone who wants it. So I eventually went on to join Acuity, thanks to a recommendation and connection through Dr. Mudasev, actually. Michael Levitt, one of the previous IRC competitors, in fact, I believe his team went on to win regionals for the first time, reached out, said, hey, we have an opening. We'd like to ask if you have any where the applicants reached out, and it went pretty well. Went up against, I think, some Fullerton, some Chapman guys. But what we primarily do, and what I now do on an everyday basis, is kind of a dual parts. I would say about 90% valuation, 10% IB work. Although I think for every year I continue on, that percentage just switched by about 10%, slowly building and switching. What we personally specialize in are ESOPs, employee stock option plans, especially with their annual valuations that they entail, which I highly, highly encourage you to go and talk to Michael Levitt in about 2 or 3 weeks on. He's by all means far more of an expert than the individual sitting in front of you who's been in the field for about 2 or 3 months. We also have some mergers and acquisitions. Again, Levitt just actually closed a major one he's been working on for a fair amount of months. So another highlight that you can ask him. And a lot of financial opinions and tax compliance. We primarily work with middle market companies, about 5 million to 500 million annual revenues. We do have some fairly bigger clients, as you can see on the screen, but kind of where we specialize in is a non-specialty, if that makes any sense. You get a lot of firms who are very focused on healthcare IB work, evaluation work, tech and app development IB work, and financial work. And what that often does is leaves out a lot of these kind of smaller sub-industries. And that's kind of where we come in and we pick it up. So a lot of the work I've been doing lately is with architecture and engineering firms, general contractors, a lot of more of the smaller clients, but localized clients too, which are a great group of people to go and work with as well. So let's kind of go into the chapters of this handbook. What we'll kind of be covering is, what should I do as an undergrad? Where should I work? How do I land an interview? What can I expect from an interview? What happens after I'm hired? And just a few links and resources that I threw in at the end that, again, I found pretty helpful, and hopefully you guys will too. One of the top things I can possibly say is do well in your classes. It's kind of unfortunate to recognize, but something that is a necessity is Cal Poly is not a target school for an IB. Even USC is, I would consider it semi-target. So we really kind of have to stand out compared to those other applicants that do have that Harvard background, Yale and whatnot, because those are the schools where they will seek out even history majors because they know how to read and how to analyze, how to critique, and then they will train the finance into them. Versus Cal Poly, where you're coming out with a bit of a finance background, but you have to show that you can compete at that higher level. So I'm pretty sure everyone here obviously is in SMIC, so that's one thing checked off, but really when you're going through undergrad years, you want to build up your resume as much as possible. And besides getting an internship or working a job, obviously finance extracurriculars are a huge way to boost that. I'm kind of going to gloss over this because it comes into more play over here. But one of the things that really sets you apart, both from your colleagues at Cal Poly, but especially at some of those target school alums, are being able to display balanced extracurriculars. I talked about it briefly earlier, but joining a social or cultural, especially social fraternity or sorority is huge. A lot of the people that will be hiring you are from, graduated 20 years ago or so plus, back when fraternities were huge, and being able to kind of connect with them on that Greek level, or even if you can find someone on that actual fraternity level, is massive. I know that one summer when I was calling 3 people a week, I would say about 70% of those were sourced from Sigma Phi Epsilon. Along with it, gives you some great opportunities to develop as a leader, and really what our kind of coined phrase is the balanced man. And really the response rate that you get from those connections and from those networks, I would say is above 95%. When you're going out and reaching out, trying to schedule phone calls, industry networking events, just any type of outreach is going to be far, far more effective than if you're just shooting out to general industry experts on LinkedIn, or even through the Cal Poly alum base, which is still more effective than LinkedIn. So that was one of the things I found by all means most helpful. Probably just slightly below IRC and SMIC in terms of preparing me for the finance industry. In fact, I believe 2/3 of the people I work with came from some type of social fraternity background. One of the other things you really want to try to build up in your undergrad years is some form of deliverable. So when you walk into an interview, especially if it's in person, you open up your portfolio and you can start passing around some type of example work that you went through or that you created. SMIC and SMIF is huge on this. The RFP was one of my primary deliverables in the earlier days when I was applying to places. And I would later actually end up attaching portions of the video report to places I was applying, including Acuity. I think I attached like a 5-minute segment of where I was presenting, and that was kind of something that sets you above and beyond the traditional just here's a cover letter, here's a resume. So I would later go on to really focus on the IRC presentation report, just because that was highly relevant to what I was applying to. Like I said, I pretty much do the same work I was doing in IRC just on a daily basis now. One of the other things too that I would say is up there in terms of the effectiveness, should you put the time and effort into it, is the final report submission for Mooseeb's portfolio management course. It's only going to be a page or two, which is great when you're having your interviewer actually go through it. Chances are they don't want to sit there and go through a 60-page document of something that you prepared. A 2-page document is perfect. It shows what you know, how you know, your ability to think critically, which is really what they're looking for above all else, even oftentimes above experience. Along with that, you know how to draft something that you can put in front of a client with confidence. One of the other things you can really do as undergrad is obtain some of these exam licenses, but if not, at least start pursuing them. Your CFA level 1 is huge. You can do that as an undergrad. I believe I postponed mine back to December, just so I can focus on our busy season right now. So that's something that's going to come up in the near future, but a little bit down the line at the moment. One of the things that's fairly recent is FINRA has created an SIE exam, which is something that you do not require sponsorship to go take, unlike all of the other FINRA exams. You can absolutely do this as an undergrad. It's not nearly as rigorous as something like CFA level 1, but it's still something that you can put on your application that looks great. Not only is it, hey, look what I did compared to everyone else, but it's, hey, look, I understand the industry. I understand that a lot of these positions do require later FINRA licenses, and I've already made progress with that organization. So it's a great kind of first step. Everyone here, I'm sure, who's gone through SMIC has already gone through BMC. Very rarely in the boutique field, which is kind of where I'm at right now, do you see Bloomberg terminals, just because they're so expensive, really, and there's a very steep learning curve to using them. Most often you'll see Capital IQ as the primary database software. But just still having that on your resume shows that you did something else as extracurricular and you're able to understand kind of that higher level analysis. All right, and then another thing you kind of do is start preparing for maybe your ASA, your CFP, your CPA, any of those future credentials. It might be difficult to conduct in your undergrad, but there is no reason that you can't start studying for the ones that you would feel would be applicable to the field that you're going into. One of the things that I really focused on back when I was calling up so many people every week or talking to all these industry experts was, where should I work and what's the difference between these different fields and places? And really the large dichotomy was, do you want to go work for a large firm or do you want to go work for a smaller boutique? And these larger firms are going to be more of your Big Four, Anderson, PIMCO, which I'm sure Joe can talk about in length, Goldman, JP Morgan, Merrill Lynch. A lot of these multi-billion-dollar revenue firms, and your compensation at these places are generally going to be about above the industry average, but they're going to climb a little slower than if you were at a boutique firm. But you'll be working far more hours. I shouldn't say far more, but definitely enough where it's worth noting. And your culture is often very corporate based, where you are there on the weekends, of course, but even during your time outside of work, it's not uncommon for them to ask you to focus on work. Your work friends become your friend friends. It's this type of places where, hey, it's the weekend, we're all going on a corporate company bike ride. You're expected to be there, kind of a mentality. And if that works for you, absolutely great. But the tenure over at these larger firms, especially as that entry level analyst position, you're going to see a lot more turnover. In fact, it's pretty common to leave within 6 months to 2 years. Even though you can extend that a little bit, just because there's also this mindset of, we're going to work you, we're going to train you with everything you can, and in 2 years, you'll be ready to go out somewhere else. They just want to pretty much use you as much as you can, which is great if you're looking for that sudden experience boost, especially if you can put GMS on your resume, oh my God. But it's something that you kind of want to consider when you're going into that kind of side of finance. Versus on the other kind of end of the extreme, and keep in mind there's a fair middle ground between these two ends. We have the boutique firms, and you do have these elite boutique firms like Lazard, Rothschild, but these tend to kind of host more of the larger firm cultures and attributes. Then you have more of the traditional smaller boutiques, such as Acuity Advisors. A lot of these smaller firms, you will expect your compensation to start a little bit maybe below industry average, for the reason being that, I'll give my firm as an example. You have 10 people. Adding that one person is a significant risk. They're taking a much bigger chance. They can't afford to really put too much dough on that one individual. But what you'll see is because you start lower, you'll accelerate your pay scale a lot faster. Along with, you're going to look at other forms of compensation between the two fields and firms, which will vary between the two. Obviously, benefits, healthcare, bonus is a big one. One of the things I highly encourage you to think about is that your own time is a form of compensation. And when you do get to the hours, you're generally going to work a little bit less in these larger firms, and that's just a product of the work that they do with their clients that they deal with. And a lot of times the location, which we'll get to in a little bit later. The culture varies drastically, like I said up top. You can have these larger firms that, or the culture that mimics these larger firms, and you can have much smaller, traditional. Yeah, you have a life outside, you want a little bit of work-life balance that's better than these larger firms. Boutique route might be the way to go. Your tenure is generally gonna be a little bit longer. And a big factor of that is they're generally looking to people that they can build up and stay with the company for a lot longer, which is something that I always kind of preferred. And that you, at least in the case of Acuity, it's a lot more frequent to see return hires. By that, I mean, you'll get someone who will leave after 2 to 8 years, go kind of hop around some of these bigger firms or other boutiques for a couple of years. But eventually there's a tendency for, if you start in the boutique field, you tend to find your way back after a couple of other positions. So just something to keep in mind. This is fairly rough in nature, but kind of broke down the IB field, both in the major industry subcategories, the positions, and then just a general expected salary, along with a few other resources out here on the left. You have what I think is one of the best videos for breaking down the different fields of IB, along with the pay and why it's like that, along with what exit routes do you have available and what is the end game that you should go after, along with 2 different salary guides, which would list about 40 to 50 different finance and accounting positions, along with a geographical adjustment. Like I think in Irvine, it's going to be a plus 30% or something like that at the very bottom. The 2019, you don't need to put in any of your information for, but the 2021, I think you do. So just a heads up there. But as you can see, if you go into this banking, primarily investment banking, you're going to get a much higher cap than if you were to go into, let's say, valuation, where it's generally much lower. And one of the things I want to kind of emphasize here is if you're not coming from a target school, you're generally going to want to knock off a little bit off the top of this. Even further yet, if depending on your location, if you're not going to New York, probably top off a little bit more of that. If you're going to a boutique, probably top off a little more of that. And eventually you kind of start adjusting it up and down based on what your preference is, what your field is, and your geographical location, which very roughly stated is over here. Of course, with any job, the more hours you work, the more compensation you're going to get. One of the running jokes that I heard was in IB, they pay you, they pay you salary because they can't afford you hourly, which is something to consider. I know that a lot of those bigger firms, actually, once you break down your compensation, it's pretty similar to making minimum wage, with the idea being that you go work for 6 months, 2 years, transfer out, get a very cushiony or very well respected job after that with a much higher salary increase. But it's very much a, we're going to work you, we're going to train you, and good luck after that. Like I said earlier, boutique firms can range anywhere here, and none of this is set. Something I do want to highlight. New York, if you're going over there on the East Coast, you're probably going to see higher compensation, higher hours. A bit of that compensation is going to be attributable to the higher cost of living, along with Los Angeles as well. There's a nice middle ground, probably should be more right around there. And Orange County tends to be right down here. A big part of that's the culture too. I know some of the firms down here, I think one of my bosses would tell me they even capital management are taking half days every other Friday during the summer, which is something that you almost never hear of in any of these other places. It's not uncommon to leave a little early on a Friday or start a little late. In fact, at my personal firm, it's totally not uncommon to show up 20, 30 minutes late, but you're expected to stay for the 3 hours after, you're supposed to leave until you finish everything you need to get done that day. So something to kind of keep in mind and consider. A general slight rule of thumb is if you take $6,000 to $9,000 times your daily hours, it's a good estimate for your post-bonus salary, but keep in mind that all these other factors with where you work are going to kind of chop off that top cap. So how do you like an interview? Great, everyone wants to know. I'm kind of going to just skip over this because this is something that should be kind of intuitive. You know, you have your job networking sites, you have your alumnus network. Again, I'll seriously highlight the fraternity and sorority. That was what I found to be by far the most valuable network. And there's by no means you have to join as a freshman or a sophomore. I've seen people come in as seniors and still join that and do fairly well. Just make sure you're joining the right one. That's all I'll kind of say on that one. In-person events and existing connections. Basically anyone, anywhere, anytime is a good mentality here. But again, when you look at the dichotomy between your larger firms and your smaller boutique firms, you get to a more dramatic difference between the two application schedules and differences. With these larger firms, you're generally going to look into 4 to 8 months early. Something I didn't know up until my senior year, so that option was already kind of X'd out, even though I tended to prefer this smaller boutique firm culture, especially because I personally gravitated towards Orange County. It's almost always a requirement that you need to have some type of internship or previous experience at that company or a similar level. Goldman Sachs isn't gonna pretty much take you if you're going to work for Joe's Investments down the street at the moment. Pretty much just what's gonna happen. LinkedIn and campus recruiters and existing employees are pretty much the most common gateway to these places versus what we'll talk about later with boutique firms. And these primarily exist in a lot of your downtown areas of major cities. Again, looking back, we see the New York and LA are the kind of two epicenters. You have SF and you have OC as kind of maybe sub epicenters, along with some other places. Minnesota is a weirdly frequent location as well. Then your boutique firms, 0 to 4 months early. A lot of times they will send out an application and say, okay, we want you to start next week. It's not uncommon to have these very weird, strange hiring schedules just because they're just trying to fill a need that has happened. Again, if you're looking at a staff only 10 people, losing one is losing 10% of your workforce. It can have a fairly dramatic effect. What is needed? A lot of times it doesn't require the same elite level of internship or work experience, but they are looking for someone that they can train up and someone who's going to stick with the company, someone who's going to be a long-term asset. So displaying some type of passion for the industry is what they're really looking for, along with a very fundamental competency. So do you have what it takes to at least start, and can we train you up? And that kind of goes into, they really are looking for someone who's going to have that long lasting tenure. So being able to market yourself in that way is something very, very helpful when you're looking at this more boutique firm level. How existing connections and employees, a lot of these places don't even utilize Indeed, LinkedIn, or Handshake, or if they do post something on there, it's not uncommon if they don't read it. A lot of times what they'll do is they'll distribute kind of internal hiring statements through their employees where they'll pass it out to all of their personal connections. This is what happened with me and Acuity. Michael Levitt reached out to Moonset, who reached out to me. That's just one of the hiring entries that you see, because again, they really want to trust who's coming in the door. And one of the best ways to do that is let's only hire people that we can kind of give vouchers for. However, there are other ways of getting around this, which is cold emailing is, I hate to say infrequently effective, but it's much, much better than if you're trying to do so at a large firm. You're probably going to see a 5 to 10% response rate if you're lucky. But it's something that can be absolutely effective if you play your cards right. You know, the problem is you're going to want to do some type of personalized cold email to each firm that you reach out to. Along with in-person visits, I had a friend over at, I think it was SDSU, who what he did in Orange County, he printed out 120 copies of his resume, 20 were spare, 100 were to hand out. Went to 5 or 6 buildings in about 4 hours and just went down to the desk. Do you have any financial advisory firms or finance firms or IB firms here? Yep, cool, what and where? Thank you. And just went from floor to floor to floor, handing out his resume. Which really, if you're thinking about it, you're marketing a product, you're marketing yourself. And if anyone ever watches Shark Tank, what's the first thing I always applaud? You went door to door, great, that shows that you actually care and you have effort. And that's something that actually ended up working for him. I think he had about 10 to 50, about a 10% hit rate on that, which is double what you're going to see on cold emailing. But that takes a fair amount of time, takes a fair amount of confidence, and it could very easily be 0. So the way down here, you're going to see a lot of these similar areas with the major cities, especially because a lot of these boutique firms work with some of these larger firms. But you're also going to see them present in minor cities like Irvine and some suburbia locations. But what's most frequent is you're going to see a lot, and I mean a lot of boutique firms within about a 3 to 5 mile radius of any airport, specifically John Wayne. If you go on Google Maps, scroll in and just look at all of the financial advisory firms, I can guarantee you they're definitely in the hundreds. And if you are trying to combine a cold email strategy, this is where I would focus. You can quickly just make a list just from looking down at Google Maps and very easily reach out there that way. So moving down to what can you expect from an interview? Those of you who have already kind of started going through this process or have talked to people who have, it's fairly standard. You're going to see a breakdown of a brief intro. They're going to go over your resume. They're going to ask you some personal questions. You're going to get some type of technical question or exam. And at the end, you're going to be asking them questions along with some type of closing statements. Before you go in, one of the things you really want to do is review on the company. If you don't know what they do or what makes them so special or apart, it's not really worth going to the interview because they're going to be able to tell that you didn't put in the preparation, so why should they put in the care for you? Just the very basics of what you need. You need another mission statement. You need another client service breakdown if you can find it. And you need to know who's interviewing you. LinkedIn's always the easiest, quickest way to do this, especially because you'll generally find some kind of personal information here, which is great when you get to the introduction and you're starting to make small talk at the very beginning of your interview. Dear God, you need a padfolio. I made that mistake during my first interview. I just showed up with a pad of paper and a pen. Not the smartest idea. You want something that looks professional because not only are you representing yourself, but should you be hired, you're representing that firm. Financial calculator, should you need it for these technical questions, and your resume. Don't just bring one, or even just one for your interviewer. Kind of a rule of thumb is one for yourself and 1.5 for each interviewer in case anything happens to it, or in case they go, oh, hey, Joe, come here and help me interview this guy, which is very common. Oh, you don't have anything going on today? Come sit in, let me know what you think of this kid. So you always want to have that extra resume to kind of pass out to that additional person. Business formal is a very kind of strict code. Should you go to one of the weird boutique firms that everyone just dresses in Hawaiian shirts and polos, which does happen, generally one level above. So what I would kind of deem as consultant wear, a jacket, open colored white shirt, and no tie is more appropriate for a place like that. In person, arrive 10 minutes early. Virtual, don't arrive 15 minutes early. You're just gonna be sitting in a waiting room and they're gonna go, okay, what's wrong with this kid? Because now they're gonna feel pressure to kind of go forward. Take advantage of the luxury that you don't have to go there early and really show off like, hey, I'm here. 5 minutes early is perfectly fine. So database training, if you can figure out what they use and possibly just look up a YouTube video or something on it, especially with Capital IQ. That's S&P Capital IQ or S&P Cap IQ. This is what's most common on some of the smaller boutique firms. Just acknowledge that they use it if you can, and acknowledge that you have some experience with it, or you've been looking at some videos, or you've had some personal self-study training with it. It goes huge because it all of a sudden lowers their cost of training with you if you have already taken some of the steps to really put your foot in the door initially, along with some of these other subcategories of database trainings. A lot of these you will have to require subscriptions for. I'm not sure, maybe Cal Poly offers some form of subscription for you to that, but it's worth checking out. When you do get to the introduction, dear God, please smile. Yeah, it's a finance firm. It's an office job, but they're people and so are their clients. They want to see that you are a person that you can interact with them because they're going to put you in front of others that you're going to have to interact with. Firm handshake, don't do it. Dead fish. I've actually had interviewers complain to me about that the person who came before me did just that. It's a lot more common than you'd realize. Start with a small compliment. If they're wearing a watch, say something nice about it. It works wonders. And then read and respond to the room. If they're just trying to get through it and kind of stick to more technical stuff, do that. If they don't have a full conversation and they don't want to cover what's on your resume, chances are you read it, they loved it. They don't need to ask you anything more about it. So I've had some interviews where literally we spent the whole session talking about tennis. Actually, I'm getting an offer from that. Seriously. Because they saw that, okay, we've read this resume, we believe you can do the job, let's see if you're a person. instead of a robot, and that works fairly well. Let's see, and general notes, the first thing you do, write down the name of who is interviewing you. When you go back and you write up that follow-up email, you want to know who to send it to. So that was one of the 6 minutes. My first one was I had to go back and try to remember who was who, and also who I talked about with who, because you're going to want to add something about that later, and write legibly and orderly. One of the things actually at my QD hiring process they told me was that previously they passed over a girl because when they started taking notes during the interview, it was totally illegible, and that they had no idea how she was structuring it. So they didn't want to have to go back and review her notes if they couldn't follow it. So it's an indication. Employment history, you're generally going to see this question every single time walking through your resume. Don't spend too long. Read a story and market yourself. I know with me it was, look, I just entered the finance field 12 months ago, but I can be trained, I have potential, and I will work my ass off. And that's kind of what sold me through my whole process. You're going to see some of these other questions down here. Again, more basic stuff, and then you're going to go into a personal question format. I'm sure everyone here is familiar with the STAR method. If not, just I'm looking at the clock and it's about 12:40. Just I hate to say, but look it up. It's pretty common. There's plenty of materials and plenty of classes deal with it online. Technical questions. This is a huge one. You're generally going to see some type of practical case example where you're going to either use these skills, primarily these top 3. You're going to want to find the error in some financial statements. You're going to want to analyze the company on a year-over-year basis. Generally, what you'll see when it comes to the questions is they will progressively ask you harder and harder questions on a topic before switching over to a new topic once you get one wrong. And in that way, they're kind of going to measure how much you know in each field. So, and then near the end, you're going to kind of switch roles where you're going to ask them questions. This is one thing that you need to go in prepared for, because if you go there, no, I don't have any questions, they're going to ask, well, did you really care enough to think about any, or are you considering us enough that you don't have any questions for us? So here's just a few ones that I've worked on that I've stated. I think this one right here is one of the best ones that's gotten the best, most promising results. So something to put out there. Closing statements generally, especially with a smaller firm, you're going to go out to lunch afterwards with the boss. Just be prepared for when that does happen. Always say thank you by the end and appreciate it. Call them by their name, which is helpful again when you write it down at the very beginning. You don't want to forget that. And one of the things that I like saving for the very, very end is what's the timeline? Because oftentimes, if they see the clock running down, they will beat you to it. And they will say, you'll expect to hear back from us by X, Y, and Z. And if they beat you to it, that's a promising sign that they want some type of further contact. So I prefer leaving it to the end instead of the beginning, just because it gives me kind of a personal indication of how it went if they beat you to it. And then your follow-up, you generally want to email the same day. Usually 40 minutes to 4 hours is a good time frame. Especially for consultant positions in some of the boutiques, handwritten thank you cards go a very long way. But keep it professional yet personal. You want to put something in there that really shows that I really appreciate how much you embody the firm's values and X, Y, and Z. And then usually with my closing statement, I'll talk about something that that we connected over during that initial small talk period. Good luck on your tennis tournament next year, or have fun with your daughter's tennis training. It's generally where that initial LinkedIn research comes in handy, so you can bridge that to the introduction and have a very nice follow-up email. It's something that really lets them know that you guys connect on a personal level. A few helpful links I included in this, which again, if you want the slide deck, by all means reach out to me on LinkedIn, or I think Brian has it, but I don't want to put him in the spot of receiving 20 different emails. So feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, I can send it to you. There's a whole list of 400 technical investment banking questions, some good YouTube responses. You can see the structure of our proper response format, and along with just a general IB interview Q&A expectations. So when I'm Zachary hired, this is pretty short, but I'm going to make it straightforward and simple. Just because you're hired doesn't mean you're good to go. You can by all means still be let go. It's not uncommon for that to happen within the first 2, 4, or 6 months. You absolutely just need to continue stepping on the gas. And the one thing I can say above all else is expect long hours. In the initial chart where we were looking at the New York, Los Angeles, Orange County hours, that low end isn't 40 hours a week. That low end is probably 60 on the very lowest of ends. It's not uncommon for you to be working 70 on that low end. When you get up to the higher end, I've heard of some people working 120 normally. And if anyone's seen the recent Goldman Sachs analyst survey, I think that's pretty indicative of what to expect if you're going to one of those bigger firms. So once you do get there, it's nice maybe after a settling period about 6 months to maybe start looking towards some of these, and then within about 1 year, start taking some type of action or steps and make it known to your firm. It shows that you are continuing on some type of sense of personal development, along with making yourself more marketable. You also are working for a company that works for clients. You are performing the service. If you go into it with a mindset of they are helping me, I'm not helping them, and you go in there to service your client and service your employer, it is absolutely more effective, both in what you do on a daily basis, how you treat your coworkers, how you treat your clients, and it does eventually show. And then kind of the unofficial rules I've come across is if your boss is in the office, so are you. If you come in on the weekdays, dress like it's a Friday. If they wear polos on Fridays, wear a polo on the weekend, but dear God, don't come in gym shorts and a t-shirt. That happens a lot more than you think. One of my favorite quotes from a fraternity alum, if you're earlier on time, if you're on time, you're late. If you're late, you're fucked. Not only does this matter with showing up, but when you're meeting a deadline, especially with a client, something to consider. And then when you do get that first job, try to stay for 2 years if you can. If you hate it, move on, but it shows commitment. It's going to be kind of hard to find another similar level job if you leave within 6 months, especially because they're just going to ask what went wrong or why didn't you stay? Will he stay with us or she stay with us? So, and also it really allows you to change how you market yourself to other employers as an experienced worker rather than a recent graduate. If you keep on going on this serial cyclical cycle of 6 months to 1 year, they're going to think, okay, well, how much did you learn? You're in this intro period fairly repetitively. So they're probably going to expect they're going to have to train you versus if you have this built up experience, it's expected that you can just kind of walk in the door and already have a fairly solid foundation because you've progressed past that initial training period at your previous firms. And finally, one of the things that I kind of put in this that, again, if you want the slide deck, by all means, reach out. Some of the resources that I found extremely helpful when I was transferring from the academic world to the professional world. Great lesson in risk versus return. Motorin as a full lecture series on valuation on YouTube. Something I really want to highlight is if you are going into the boutique world, and you're especially dealing with smaller private companies. Marketability control discounts are huge. So something I didn't run into in my undergrad years that I now do on every single project. So something to consider. If you're interested in the ESOP world, where I come from, great white paper kind of walking me through what it is, how it operates, and the benefits to it. In terms of going through an interview, it's not particularly pertaining to finance, but it is greatly applicable. How to win friends and influence people. I'm sure a fair amount of people have come across this. Works great when you're trying to market yourself. Vanderbilt, I think their Career Center released a fairly robust guide on how to actually enter IB, along with this other, although it's written with a few grammatical errors, I'll be open and honest from it. It's a very abrupt and blunt piece on, okay, you're not coming from Harvard or Yale. How do you go up there and compete in there? Chances are it's going to take some extra time and some extra years and some extra effort, but you can do it, and this is how. And then I put this in earlier, but just to highlight it again, because almost every single technical question I've been asked in an interview appears in this page. 400 technical interview questions for the IB world. Great thing to just go and review 20 a day before you go to bed, or go through 50 or so on the weekend. It was something I did constantly. So for those of you who want this deck, reach out to me on LinkedIn or reach out to Brian. I believe I give him a copy of it. You're going to see the examples of relevant application materials if you want to know how to structure a resume or cover letter. That's on those first few slides. Some suggestions on what you can do as an undergrad and what I found most helpful. The different industry fields and kind of the breakdowns. I didn't include everything, like I didn't put consulting in there, insurance sales. So there is a vast majority of fields out there that weren't covered. Some networking advice, some interview guides and tips, including all those questions, and some other resources and videos should you want some further self-study. So I see that time's kind of coming in. I don't know if there's time for Q&A. I'll let you know I'm good till 1. I have it blocked out. But for those of you who want to reach out to me personally, by all means do so. I'm more than happy to have a phone call, or if you just want to chat over LinkedIn or just connect, it's there as well. So thanks for having me, Brian. Appreciate it.
No, thank you, Zach. If we could at least, a virtual round of applause for Zach. Luckily, looks like things might be opening up, so maybe we'll have you in person another time. So we probably won't stay till 1. That way you have a little bit of time to get your stuff. So maybe we'll do 12:55, but I'd like to do just a few Q&As. Yeah, so if you do have a question, what we're going to do, so not everyone's shouting at the same time. If you want to just put your question in the Q&A in the chat, and then one of us will go ahead and ask it for you. And then if you would like the presentations or the slide deck, or if you're a SMIC Plus member and have a recording, feel free to email me, or that way Zach doesn't get those 20 emails, because I think I'm okay with that. So yeah, cppsmic@gmail. That's the best way to reach us. All right, so I'll start with the first question. You talked a lot about hours, that work-life balance. So just more specifically on that, how much, what do you like most about your work? I know you said you're doing IRC all the time now, so I don't know if that's a compliment or a not compliment. So yeah, what do you like most about it?
Yeah, I'll highlight the hours. There's a reason why my face kind of blends in with my shirt, and that's for the first 2 months. I was very stretched to find any sun on Monday through Friday. Thankfully, the hour change kind of helped fix that, but that is something to be prepared for. What I personally love most is I get over the diverse client base. I'm not kind of pigeonholed into a single industry, which you're going to see a lot of the time if you're going towards some of these larger firms. Kind of having that, along with, because we are the boutique firm and we kind of offer this wide range of specialties, I get to touch not only each of those fields, but I get to touch every step of the way, whether it's conducting diligence meetings with CFOs, CEOs, controllers, or just the board of directors, all the way to analysts and financials, interpreting them, generating reports, going through the trustee review meetings. And it's something where I'm not kind of pigeonholed into this. You're going to do this one stage, you're going to become an expert of it, and you're going to be great at it. That's great. If you want that, by all means, go for it. I'm personally going to prefer really being able to have this breadth. So I would compare it to an ocean wide but an inch deep, but I think it's much more like a lake wide and maybe a swimming pool deep. It is a far greater applicable phrase. So along with, I love the fact that I don't have to work 120 hours a week. I won't lie about that. That is amazing. That's one of the reasons why I kind of wanted to target Orange County. Along there's a lot less stress of a work environment. I'm working for a boutique firm, just like I went to Cal Poly for the idea of I'll go to a smaller school and really explore the options there and be a bigger fish in a smaller pond. Exact same mentality of going into a boutique versus a larger firm.
Yeah, also you can't beat the weather, right? Great. So Albie, did you have a question?
I did have a question. I think it was somewhat answered, but I suppose I'll ask it once again. Mr. Zachary, I've been very excited to have you coming in this week, and I know that you are you have a great track record of wonderful achievements at Cal Poly. So I myself was very excited to listen to the advice that you had. I noticed towards the beginning of the slides, we also, to me, unfortunately, was just a little bit shocking with the 50 to 80 hours work week. Is that something that is perpetual across the career, or is that kind of like the first year, second year onboarding to demonstrate your aptitude and ability? I know that I myself have a difficult time with work-life balance. Unfortunately, as many people are in this meeting, they work very hard. And it takes up a lot of time, but maybe it also isn't a bad idea to have a good work-life healthy balance. So again, my question might be, is the 50 to 80 hours something that somebody can expect throughout their entire career?
Yeah, it definitely weighs down the higher up you go, but by no means does it ever drop to a 40-hour work week. I think that's something that's extremely important to highlight, especially if you're going to a larger firm. If you are especially looking to make that partner level at a big firm, your family, your friends, your social life is your work life. That comes first, and that does not stop for a minimum of 10 years. Versus if you do go to that boutique route, again, you're on that smaller level where hours are a bit more conservative in nature, but by no means is it a small work week. I think I've been averaging personally 65, 60, 65. So it's not bad, but it's peaked once or twice, especially when we've had a transaction coming through a close. But I think a good way of idealizing it is that phrase I said earlier: if your boss is in the office, chances are you work too. Well, if you track that and you have 5 bosses, you have to be in there pretty much anytime one of them is in the office. So if someone comes early and someone stays late, congratulations, you now have the luxury of doing both. Versus if you only have maybe one boss above you, if he comes early, well, you don't have to worry about someone else coming in, staying late, and being there to support their role. So, and again, these are all fairly malleable in nature. It doesn't apply to every firm. In fact, I would say the firm that I currently work with is on the far more liberal side of that, where again, it's not uncommon to come in 30 minutes late, but by all means, stay 4 or 5 hours late to get your work done. So.
Thank you, Mr. Zachary. I guess that corresponds with many of our already very busy schedule. And again, I know that people that are on this meeting are probably incredibly familiar with a lot of hours working.
Yeah.
So Zach, if you don't mind, we might have time for one more question. This is from Victor. He asked, when you talked about the licenses and exams, does the knowledge from something like the FINRA SIE help in the working world, or is it more for show on the resume?
The SIE exam is much more for showing your resume. It kind of has a base foundation of what finance is. I would say some of your advanced classes, that highest tier that you take in Cal Poly, are going to far exceed some of the material that you cover in it. But it's that kind of extra step of showing that you did something else. However, if you get to CFA level 1, I would say that's pretty much equivalent to your undergraduate bachelor's degree in finance or something of similar sorts. But one thing I do want to highlight is if you do pursue that CFA route, your level 1 is kind of going to be that bachelor route, or so your level 2 is going to be a lot more of the evaluation focus. I can't tell you from personal experience, but from what I've been told, the work that you do a lot of in these evaluation boutique firms, like what I'm doing now, is supposed to prepare you for that level 2. It's very similar to what you conduct. Versus level 3 is going to be a lot more in the portfolio management stages. So a lot of it depends on which license you pursue and at what level you actually conduct it in. And I know it's 12:55, but just a quick little side note to Dolly's question at the very end, because I think it is something that's worth highlighting. What are the most represented schools in small boutique firms in Orange County or Irvine? The 3 I've actually most come across are Cal Poly, Chapman, and Fullerton, with some Long Beach. So something worth throwing out there. You do see a larger concentration of these smaller state schools or just smaller private schools than if you were to go to some of those larger firms. So there is something that's worth patting yourself on the back for if you came from Cal Poly. In fact, I think I'm the 3rd or 4th out of 10 people in my office to come from Cal Poly. So.
Cool.
Thank you so much, Zach, for answering my question.
Yeah, no worries. It was a quick 1-minute one, so I don't want to throw in the extra one in there.
Yeah. So we'll let you go, Zach, but we're all really proud of you, and thanks for coming and for sharing all of that. It is recorded, so I'll send that over to you in case you ever need it. But for those that are SMIC Plus members, we'll have the recording and some of the slide decks posted up as well. But for now, thank you to everyone who joined us on the first week back from spring break. Zach, I don't know when your spring break is, but hopefully soon.
What's a break?
Yeah. But thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day and your week. Thank you, Professor Musa, for coming as well. We'll make sure to send out that email.
My pleasure. Good luck to you guys. You had a great host. You had a great guest today.
I had great teachers, including Musa and Joe and Brian involved in that. So,
You make
all right, well, I've got to get back to work, but have a great day, everyone.
Good luck to you, all of you. Good luck to all of you. Let me know if I can be of any help, Brian. Okay?
Thank you, Professor. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Take care.
All right. So for now, we're signing off. We'll see you guys next week.